Rapunzel. There once lived a man and his wife, who had long wished for a child, but in vain. Now there was at the back of their house a little window which overlooked a beautiful garden full of the finest vegetables and flowers, but there was a high wall all around it, and no one ventured into it, for it belonged to a witch of great power, and of whom all the world was afraid. One day, when the wife was standing at the window and looking into the garden, she saw a bed filled with the finest rampion, a kind of lettuce, and it looked so fresh and green that she began to wish for some, and at length she longed for it greatly. This went on for days, and as she knew she could not get the rampion, she pined away and grew pale and miserable. Then her husband was uneasy and said, "What is the matter, dear wife?"
Oh, I shall die unless I can have some of that rampion to eat that grows in the garden at the back of our house.
The man, who loved her very much, thought to himself, "Rather than lose my wife, I will get some rampion, cost what it will." So in the twilight he climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, and plucked hastily a handful of rampion, and brought it to his wife. She made a salad of it at once, and ate of it to her heart's content. But she liked it so much, and it tasted so good, that the next day she longed for it thrice as much as she had done before. If she was to have any rest, the man must climb over the wall once more. So he went in the twilight again, and as he was climbing back, he saw all at once the witch standing before him, and was terribly frightened, as she cried with angry eyes,
How dare you climb over into my garden like a thief and steal my rampion? It shall be the worse for you.
"Oh, please, my woman, be merciful, rather than just. I have only done it through necessity, for my wife saw your rampion out of the window, and became possessed with so great a longing that she would have died if she could not have had some to eat."
If it is all as you say, you may have as much rampion as you like, but on one condition. The child that will come into the world must be given to me. It shall go well with the child, and I will care for it like a mother.
In his distress of mind, the man promised everything, and when the time came when the child was born, the witch appeared, and giving the child the name of Rapunzel, which is the same as rampion, she took it away with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower in the midst of a wood, and it had neither steps nor a door, only a small window above. When the witch wished to be let in, she would stand below and would cry,
Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair.
Rapunzel had beautiful long hair that shone like gold. When she heard the voice of the witch, she would undo the fastening of the upper window, unbind the pleats of her hair, and let it down 20 feet below, and the witch would climb up by it. After they had lived thus a few years, it happened that as a king's son was riding through the wood, he came to the tower, and as he drew near, he heard a voice singing so sweetly that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel. In her loneliness, she tried to pass away the time with sweet songs. The king's son wished to go in to her, and sought to find a door in the tower, but there was none. So he rode home, but the song had entered into his heart, and every day he went into the wood and listened to it. Once, as he was standing there under a tree, he saw the witch come up, and listened while she called out,
Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair.
Then he saw how Rapunzel let down her long tresses, and how the witch climbed up by them, and went into her. And he said to himself, Since that is the ladder, I will climb up it, and seek my fortune. And the next day, as soon as it began to grow dusk, he went to the tower and cried, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. And she let down her hair, and the king's son climbed up by it. Rapunzel was greatly terrified when she saw that a man had come into her, for she had never seen one before. But the king's son began speaking so kindly to her, and told how her singing had entered into his heart, so that he could not have any peace until he had seen her for himself. Then Rapunzel forgot her terror, and when he asked her to take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought to herself,
I certainly like him much better than old Mother Gothel.
and she put her hand into his hand, saying,
I would willingly go with you, but I do not know how I shall get out. Oh, I know. When you come, bring each time a silken rope, and I will make a ladder, and when it is quite ready, I will get down by it out of the tower, and you shall take me away on your horse.
They agreed that he should come to her every evening, as the old woman came in the daytime. So the witch knew nothing of all this until once Rapunzel said to her unwittingly,
Mother Gothel, how is it that you climb up here so slowly, and the king's son is with me in a moment? Oh, you wicked child! What is this I hear? I thought I had hidden you from all the world, and you have betrayed me! Oh!
In her anger she seized Rapunzel by her beautiful hair, struck her several times with her left hand, and then grasping a pair of scissors in her right, snip, snip, she cut the beautiful locks, and they lay on the ground. Now she was so hard-hearted that she took Rapunzel and put her away in a desert place, where she lived in great woe and misery. The same day on which she took Rapunzel away, she went back to the tower in the evening, and made fast the several locks of hair in the window-sill. And the king's son came and cried, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. Then she let the hair down, and the king's son climbed up, but instead of his dearest Rapunzel, he found the witch looking at him with wicked glittering eyes.
Aha! You came for your darling, but the sweet bird sits no longer in the nest and sings no more. The cat has got her and will scratch your eyes out as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will see her no more.
The king's son was beside himself with grief, and in his agony he sprang from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns in which he fell put out his eyes. Then he wandered blind through the wood, eating nothing but roots and berries, and doing nothing but lament and weep for the loss of his dearest wife. So he wandered several years in misery, until at last he came to a desert place where Rapunzel lived with her twin children that she had borne, a boy and a girl. At first he heard a voice that he thought he knew, and when he reached the place from which it seemed to come, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. And when her tears touched his eyes, they became clear again, and he could see with them as well as ever. Then he took her to his kingdom, where he was received with great joy, and there they lived long and happily. The end. Clever Grethel. There was once a cook called Grethel, who wore shoes with red heels, and when she went out in them, she gave herself great airs, and thought herself very fine indeed. When she came home again, she would take a drink of wine to refresh herself, and as that gave her an appetite, she would then take some of the best of whatever she was cooking, until she had had enough. For, said she,
A cook must know how things taste.
it happened that one day her master came to her and said, Gretel, I expect a guest this evening. You must make ready a pair of fowls.
I will see to it.
Answered Gretel. So she killed the fowls, cleaned them and plucked them, and put them on the spit, and then, as evening drew near, placed them before the fire to roast. And they began to brown, and were nearly done, but the guests had not arrived.
Oh, master, master, if he does not make haste, I must take them away from the fire. It's a pity and a shame not to eat them now, just when they are done to a turn.
And the master said he would run himself and fetch the guest. As soon as he had turned his back, Gretel took the fowls from the fire.
Standing so long before the fire makes one hot and thirsty, and who knows when they will come. In the meanwhile, I will go to the cellar and have a drink.
So down she ran, took up a mug, and saying,
Here's to me!
took a good draught.
One good drink deserves another, and it should not be cut short.
So she took another hearty draught. Then she went and put the fowls down to the fire again, and basting them with butter, she turned the spit briskly round. And now they began to smell so good that Gretel, saying,
I must find out whether they really are okay.
licked her fingers, and then cried,
Well, I never! The fowls are good. It's a sin and a shame that no one is here to eat them.
So she ran to the window to see if her master and his guest were coming. But as she could see no one, she went back to her fowls.
Why, one of the wings is burning. I had better eat it and get it out of the way.
So she cut it off and ate it up, and it tasted good. And then she thought,
I had better cut off the other one too, in case the master should miss anything.
and when both wings had been disposed of, she went and looked for the master, but still he did not come.
Oh, who knows whether they are coming or not? They may have put up at an inn.
And after a pause she said again,
Come, I may as well make myself happy. And first I will make sure of a good drink, and then of a good meal. And when all is done, I shall be easy. The gifts of the gods are not to be despised.
First she ran down into the cellar and had a famous drink, and ate up one of the fowls with great relish. And when that was done, and still the master did not come, Gretel eyed the other fowl, saying,
What one is, the other must be. The two belong to each other. It is only fair that they should be both treated alike. Perhaps when I have had another drink, I shall be able to manage it.
So she took another hearty drink, and then the second fowl went the way of the first. Just as she was in the middle of it, the master came back. Make haste, Gretel. The guest is coming directly.
Oh, very well, master. It will soon be ready.
The master went to see that the table was properly laid, and taking the great carving knife with which he meant to carve the fowls, he sharpened it upon the step. Presently came the guest, knocking very genteelly and softly at the front door. Gretel ran and looked to see who it was, and when she caught sight of the guest, she put her finger on her lips, saying,
Hush! Make the best haste you can out of this, for if my master catches you, it will be bad for you. He asked you to come to supper, but he really means to cut off your ears. Just listen how he is sharpening his knife.
The guest, hearing the noise of the sharpening, made off as fast as he could go, and Gretel ran screaming to her master.
A pretty guest you have asked to the house.
How so, Gretel? What do you mean?
What indeed? Why, he has gone and run away with my pair of fowls that I had just dished up.
Odd sort of conduct, said the master, feeling very sorry about the fowls. He might at least have left me one, that I might have something to eat. And he called out to him to stop. But the guest made as if he did not hear him. Then he ran after him, the knife still in his hand, crying out, Only one! Only one! Meaning that the guest should have let him have one of the fowls and not take both. But the guest thought he meant to have only one of his ears, and he ran so much the faster that he might get home with both of them safe. The end. The Iron Chest. In the days when wishing was still of some use, a king's son was bewitched by an old witch, and shut up in an iron chest in a forest. There he passed many years, and no one could deliver him. Then a king's daughter came into the forest, who had lost her way, and could not find her father's kingdom again. After she had wandered about for 9 days, she at length came to an iron chest. Then a voice came forth from it and asked her, Where do you come from, and where are you going? She answered,
I have lost my father's kingdom and cannot get home again.
Then a voice inside the iron chest said, I will help you to get home again, and that indeed most swiftly, if you will promise to do what I desire of you. I am the son of a far greater king than your father, and I will marry you. Then she was afraid and thought,
Good heavens, what can I do with an iron chest?
But as she much wished to get home to her father, she promised to do as he desired. But he said, You must return here and bring a knife with you, and scrape a hole in the iron. Then he gave her a companion who walked near her, but did not speak. And in 2 hours he took her home. There was great joy in the castle when the king's daughter came home, and the old king fell on her neck and kissed her. She, however, was sorrowfully troubled, and said,
Dear father, what I have suffered. I should never have got home again from the great wild forest if I had not come to an iron chest, but I have been forced to give my word that I will go back to it, set it free, and marry it.
Then the old king was so terrified that he all but fainted, for he had but this one daughter. They therefore resolved that they would send in her place the miller's daughter, who was very beautiful. They took her there, gave her a knife, and said she was to scrape at the iron chest. So she scraped at it for 24 hours, but could bring nothing off but the least morsel of it. When day dawned, a voice inside the chest said, It seems to me it is day outside. Then the miller's daughter answered,
It seems to me too. I fancy I hear the noise of my father's mill.
So you are a miller's daughter? Then go away at once, and let the king's daughter come here. Then she went away at once, and told the old king that the man outside there would have none of her. He wanted the king's daughter. They, however, still had a swineherd's daughter, who was even prettier than the miller's daughter. and they determined to give her a piece of gold to go to the iron chest instead of the king's daughter. So she was taken there, and she also had to scrape for 24 hours. She, however, made nothing of it, and when day broke, a voice inside the chest cried,
It seems to me it is day outside.
So it seems to me also. I fancy I hear my father's horn blowing.
Then thou art a swineherd's daughter. Go away at once, and tell the king's daughter to come, and tell her all must be done as was promised. And if she does not come, everything in the kingdom shall be ruined and destroyed, and not one stone be left standing on another. When the king's daughter heard that, she began to weep, for now there was nothing for it but to keep her promise. So she took leave of her father, put a knife in her pocket, and went forth to the iron chest in the forest. When she got there, she began to scrape, and the iron gave way. And when 2 hours were over, she had already scraped a small hole. Then she peeped in, and saw a youth so handsome, and so brilliant with gold and precious jewels, that her very soul was delighted. Now therefore she went on scraping, and made the hole so large that he was able to get out. Then he said, You are mine, and I am yours. You are my bride, and you have released me. He wanted to take her away with him to his kingdom, but she entreated him to let her go once again to her father, and the king's son allowed her to do so. But she was not to say more to her father than 3 words, and then she was to come back again. So she went home, but she spoke more than the 3 words, and instantly the iron chest disappeared and was taken far away over glass mountains and piercing swords. But the king's son was set free, and no longer shut up in it. After this she bade good-bye to her father, took some money with her, but not much, and went back to the great forest and looked for the iron chest. But it was nowhere to be found. For 9 days she sought after it, and then her hunger grew so great that she did not know what to do, for she could no longer live. When it was evening, she seated herself in a small tree, and made up her mind to spend the night there, as she was afraid of the wild beasts. When midnight drew near, she saw in the distance a small light, and thought to herself,
There, I should be saved.
She got down from the tree and went towards the light, but on the way she prayed. Then she came to a little old house, and much grass had grown all about it, and a small heap of wood lay in front of it. She thought,
Oh, where have I come to?
and she peeped in through the window, but she saw nothing inside but toads, big and little, except a table covered with wine and roast meat, and the plates and glasses were of silver. Then she took courage and knocked at the door. The fat toad cried,
Little green waiting maid with the limping leg, little dog of the limping leg, hop hither and thither, and quickly see who is without.
and a small toad came walking by and opened the door to her. When she entered, they all bade her welcome, and she was forced to sit down. They asked,
Where hast thou come from, and where are you going?
Then she related all that had befallen her, and how because she had transgressed the order which had been given her not to say more than 3 words, the iron chest and the king's son also had disappeared, and now she was about to seek him over hill and dale until she found him. Then the old fat toad said,
Little green waiting maid with the limping leg, little dog of the limping leg, hop hither and thither, and bring me the great box.
Then the little one went and brought the box. After this, they gave her meat and drink, and took her to a well-made bed, which felt like silk and velvet, and she laid herself therein, in God's name, and slept. When morning came, she arose, and the old toad gave her 3 needles out of the great box, which she was to take with her. They would be needed by her, for she had to cross a high glass mountain, and go over 3 piercing swords and a great lake. If she did all this, she would get her lover back again. Then he gave her 3 things, which she was to take the greatest care of, namely, 3 large needles, a plough wheel, and 3 nuts. With these she traveled onwards, and when she came to the glass mountain, which was so slippery, she stuck the 3 needles first behind her feet, and then before them, so she got over it, and when she was over it, she hid them in a place which she marked carefully. After this, she came to the 3 piercing swords, and then she seated herself on her plough wheel and rolled over them. At last she arrived in front of a great lake, and when she had crossed it, she came to a large and beautiful castle. She went in and asked for a place. She was a poor girl, she said, and would like to be hired. She knew, however, that the king's son, whom she had released from the iron chest in the great forest, was in fact in the castle. Then she was taken on as a scullery maid at low wages. But already the king's son had another maiden by his side whom he wanted to marry, for he thought that she had long been dead. In the evening, when she had washed up and was done, she felt in her pocket and found the 3 nuts which the old toad had given her. She cracked one with her teeth, and was going to eat the kernel, when lo and behold, there was a stately royal garment in it. But when the bride heard of this, she came and asked for the dress, and wanted to buy it.
It is not a dress for a servant girl.
But she said no, she would not sell it. But if the bride would grant her one thing, she would have it, and that was leave to sleep one night in her bridegroom's chamber. The bride gave her permission because the dress was so pretty, and she had never had one like it. When it was evening, she said to her bridegroom,
That silly girl will sleep in my room.
If thou art willing, so am I. She, however, gave him a glass of wine in which she had poured a sleeping draught. So the bridegroom and the scullery maid went to sleep in the room, and he slept so soundly that she could not waken him. She went the whole night and cried,
I'm the one who set you free when you were in the iron chest. I'm the one who sought you. I'm the one who walked over a glass mountain and 3 sharp swords and a great lake before I found you, and yet you will not even hear me.
The servant sat by the chamber door and heard how she thus wept the whole night through, and in the morning they told it to their lord. The next evening, when she had washed up, she opened the second nut, and a far more beautiful dress was there in it, and when the bride beheld it, she wished to buy it as well. But the girl would not take money, and begged that once more she would like to sleep in the bridegroom's chamber. The bride, however, gave him a sleeping drink, and he slept so soundly that he could hear nothing. But the scullery maid wept the whole night long, and cried,
I'm the one who set you free when you were in the iron chest.
I'm the one who saw you. I'm the one who walked over a glass mountain and 3 sharp swords and a great lake before I found you. And yet you will not even hear me.
The servants sat by the chamber door and heard her weeping the whole night through, and in the morning informed their lord of it. And on the 3rd evening, when she had washed up, she opened the 3rd nut, and within it was a still more beautiful dress, which was stiff with pure gold. When the bride saw that, she wanted to have it, but the maiden only gave it up on condition that she might for the 3rd time sleep in the bridegroom's apartment. The king's son was, however, on his guard, and threw the sleeping draught away. Now therefore, when she began to weep and cry,
Dearest love, I am the one who set you free when you were in the iron chest in a terrible wild forest.
the king's son leapt up and said, You are the true bride. You are mine, and I am yours. Thereupon, while it was still night, he got into a carriage with her, and they took away the false bride's clothes, so that she could not get up. When they came to the great lake, they sailed across it, and when they reached the 3 sharp cutting swords, they seated themselves on the plough wheel, and when they got to the glass mountain, they thrust the 3 needles in it, and so at length they got to the little old house. But when they went inside, it was a great castle, and the toads were all disenchanted, and were king's children, and full of happiness. Then the wedding was celebrated, and the king's son and the princess remained in the castle, which was much larger than the castles of their fathers. As, however, the old king grieved at being left alone, they fetched him away and brought him to live with them. And then they had 2 kingdoms and lived in happy wedlock. The end.